Welcome back. I'm your host, Vanessa Levin, and you're listening to Elevating Early Childhood. Let me ask you a question. Do you ever feel pressured to put up amazing bulletin boards in your classroom? Does the teacher next door to you have jaw-dropping, eye-catching bulletin boards that everybody in your school raves about? You see, I realized very early in my career that I didn't have the patience or the talent for creating awe-inspiring bulletin boards. But I also found myself in a school where there was a monthly requirement for creating eye-catching bulletin boards that turned into a cutthroat competition between teachers. Luckily, at my next school, we weren't allowed to put anything on the walls that wasn't child-created. So that solved that problem for me. What I learned from that experience shaped the way I viewed bulletin boards from there on out. In fact, I feel so strongly about this topic that I just knew I had to do a podcast episode all about bulletin boards in the classroom. But I also wanted to bring on a guest that shared my viewpoint, so you'd know this wasn't just another one of my quirky ideas or theories, which is why I invited my good friend Matt Halpern to join us today. Matt has taught early elementary for almost 20 years. He's also the author of Look at My Happy Rainbow, My Journey as a Male Kindergarten Teacher, as well as the author of a forthcoming book by Heinemann. So Matt, I brought you here today because you're a fabulous speaker, a good friend. We've known each other virtually for many, many years. And I know that this is a topic that you're passionate about, and it's a topic that I'm passionate about. And that topic is the walls in our classroom, right? And I don't know about you, Matt. I can only assume, but in my experience, a lot of teachers put a lot of time, energy, effort into making the classroom look beautiful, like Pinterest worthy, if you will. And I kind of have a different perspective on that, and I think you do too. Do you want to lead us off in this discussion and give me your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. One thing that you left out about all the things that teachers put into their classroom is their own money as well.
Oh, yeah.
So that's just a little side point. I mean, we all spend so much money on our classrooms, but this is another way that I'm thinking people can save some money. So this has been a journey for me. I always like to tell people I've been teaching a long time, and it's not something that just happened at the beginning of my teaching career. I used to be the teacher that spent all summer. Well, this was back when you could actually go to a teacher's store and buy things. I don't know that they even exist anymore. Now it's all online, and I would spend money and time, and I was picking out things that matched. And then I would go into my classroom and spend more time making it all look right. Or what I thought was right. Over the years, what I started to think about and reflect on was, what is the purpose of all of this? Why am I doing all of this? Is it really making a difference? And what I started to do was seek out other teachers who did things a little differently. And I saw classrooms that were filled with student-created work, student-created charts, student-created calendars, schedules, all the things that I bought previously. And I started to think about how I could make a shift. And the thing that I try to explain to people is that I feel like this is a big shift for a lot of people. And so you have to do it in steps. And what I usually recommend is thinking about one thing in your classroom that maybe you could try creating with kids. It could be something that's already up in your classroom. The first time I remember that I really kind of went for it with this, my classroom already had a lot of these things up. They were things that I had put up. I'm going to be honest, I hadn't even made them. They were things that I had bought, like a schedule, like a calendar, things like that. And I had been doing so much interactive writing with my class. They were the ones that started saying, hey, why can't we make our own schedule? Or why can't we make our own calendar? And when it came from the kids, that was the light bulb moment for me that, okay, this is something that we should be changing. And so I actually created those things with my students and replaced what was already up. So that's also a tip. A lot of people don't feel comfortable starting the school year with things missing from their classroom. So one little tip I give people is have those things up. And then as your students come in and you feel more comfortable with them, transition from the calendar maybe that you bought or the schedule that you bought and change it with your kids. Now, I will tell you, after years of doing this, I now would start the school year with an empty classroom, mostly. I mean, there's furniture. I label, because I want kids to see their name in some places on the first day of school. But the calendar, nope. I've got the pocket chart, but there's nothing in it. The schedule chart, the pocket chart, but it's empty. And as those things come up in those first few days of school, we create them together.
I think that is such an important point, because I think we as teachers often feel like there's peer pressure, right? Just like there was in high school, there's peer pressure in the classroom. And I think that especially for our younger teachers who have become teachers after the invention of Pinterest, after the proliferation of devices in the internet, I'm fortunate enough that when I was coming up as a new teacher, none of these things existed. And so the peer pressure wasn't as great, but I will say
Sure.
that I did subscribe to a lot of magazines, and they would have, and so I did the bulletin board thing. Like, I remember as a brand new teacher, I was in a really old school. We had these bulletin boards. They covered the walls. Every inch of the classroom, except for where the windows were, was covered with bulletin boards or a chalkboard. And they were so tall that I had to get a giant ladder out to decorate them every month. And I was under the impression that every month, on the last day of the month, that I had to get the ladder out and put up these elaborate bulletin boards. And I only had 16 kids, and I had 6 bulletin boards. Can you imagine the amount of work that went into that? I did that for about half of that year that I worked in that particular school. And then I threw in the towel and said, I'm done. And I kind of made them all generic to stay the rest of the year. Like that was the extent of my foray into elaborate bulletin boards or elaborate decor. Because I didn't have the money, to be honest, as a new teacher, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and I've had conversations with folks about just what you're talking about. As a new teacher, why is it when I was a new teacher, and it sounds like you, and I'm guessing a lot of people watching and listening, when you're a new teacher, why do you feel that pressure? And this is what I landed on. And tell me what you think. I feel like when I was new, I think back, brand new teacher, there was so much I didn't know. Mm-hmm. There was so much that was out of my control. And I felt like, here's what I can control.
Yep.
I can control what the classroom looks like. Yep. I can't control anything else because I'm brand new and I don't know what's going to walk in that door on the first day, and I don't know. And so that is something I can control. I also, and this is just my experience, I was really worried about what parents were going to think. I think some of it was I was a man teaching little kids, and but I think other people feel this too who aren't men. And I thought, if my classroom looks a certain way, people will think I'm a good teacher.
Yep.
I think in hindsight, which we have some hindsight, I know all that's not true, but as a new teacher, I think that's where it comes from. I guess my message to folks, what I try to impart to new teachers when I talk to them or write about it on a blog or that kind of a thing, is the other thing that you can focus on besides what your classroom looks like is your practice. There are professional books you can read. There are podcasts you can listen to, blogs you can read about how can you make your teaching the best it can be? How can you build relationships with your students? And honestly, this isn't the only way, but doing this kind of work with your kids is a fantastic way to build relationships and build the classroom community. Yeah. When kids come into the classroom and it's empty, the message that they're getting, because I tell them this, is, I have been waiting for you. Mm-hmm. this space is your space. Now that you're here, let's create our classroom together. I literally say that to them. When I send my letter to kids and families in the summer, I let parents and kids know that when they see the room for the first time, it's going to look sparse. And I then explain why. Because a lot of times what I hear from teachers is, what will parents think? What will families think when they come to my open house? And there's not a lot up. And so I want them to understand. I also, and these are all over Instagram, I've seen them, and I think I might have one on my website, I can't remember. I print a sign out and put it on bulletin boards that tells people, here's why the bulletin board's empty. And it's basically what I just said. I've been waiting for your children to come. When you come back a few weeks after school starts, the room's going to look very different.
Yeah. I love it. And part of my perspective was shaped by, after that experience that I had where I was, and it was for exact reasons you just named. I was brand new and didn't know what I was doing. And I thought that was going to show people that I knew and made me a good teacher and all that. And I realized very quickly that that's not the case. But what I experienced after that was that I went to Head Start, and a couple of years later, and they didn't allow any store-bought things in the classroom as far as decor or decoration on the walls. And so I had to really think outside the box. And I don't remember if I learned it or just came up with it, I'm not sure, but we took that tape from the registers. You know what I'm talking about? Oh, this is old school. This tells you how old I am.
Yeah. Register tape. Yes.
Yeah, register tape. And we took that, and when the kids came in, like on the first or second day, I put butcher paper on the tables first, but then I put that receipt tape out, and we decorated that, or sentence strips. I remember using those one year too, which are more sturdy. And we would make our bulletin board borders out of that. And I remember just looking at my bulletin boards and going, that's so adorable. Like, that's so appropriate. Every kid has made their mark on it. It's meaningful to them. It can stay up all year. It doesn't have to be seasonal. It was phenomenal.
That example that you just gave is a perfect example for every kid in your classroom to feel valued and seen from the first day of school. So maybe I don't know how to write my name. Maybe I don't know how to read my name. Maybe I barely know how to hold a pencil or a crayon, but I can decorate a sentence strip or some register tape, even if I need a little help. And then guess what? My teacher put it up. So how does that make me feel as a 4-year-old, 5-year-old? Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And that is why I think it's so powerful. And if you extend that to other things in the classroom, I worked in a school similar to what you described, where the expectation was every teacher had a bulletin board that was in the hallway. Mm-hmm. And the expectation was every month you were going to change that bulletin board. And I did not like that. I didn't like the pressure that I felt. And so what I started to do was, I don't want to say I put the pressure on my students, because that's not what I did, I hope, but I put it to them. I basically said, what are we going to put on our bulletin board? What have we been reading about? What have we been talking about? What have we been learning about? And whatever we've been reading, learning, or talking about, let's create a bulletin board. What are we going to do? Oh, let's write a chart. Let's draw some pictures. I let the kids do it. And number one, they were super engaged. Number two, they were having fun. Number three, when they walked in the hallway and they saw the bulletin board that it was their idea. It wasn't even just that they created it all. They helped come up with the idea for it. They loved it. They engaged with it. They read it. And did my bulletin boards look like other teachers? No. Nothing was cut out by me. I didn't use the die cut machine. I didn't use what are those things called that I always thought I wanted, but I never had? A Cricut. I didn't use a Cricut to cut out the letters. I always wanted one, but I never could see spending the money to buy one. And so the kids made everything. So a bulletin board, here's an example. One year we were reading about penguins, because I think it was January or February, and it was cold in New England. So we were reading about penguins. Kids love penguins. And so for the bulletin board, the kids said, let's show what we've learned about penguins. So I use that as an opportunity to teach them. Now, this is kindergarten, to teach them some basic note-taking skills. Like when you read a book, you think, what's the most important part that I just read? Let's write it. Now, granted, I wasn't writing it. We were using interactive writing, so the kids were coming up, and we made a whole chart of all the facts we learned about penguins. And then we did a directed drawing where they all drew a penguin and colored it. I put it up, and that was the bulletin board. It totally transformed the way I felt about the pressure to change that bulletin board. And I'll tell you, people loved seeing that kind of work up in the school. So, I know people like cute things too, but.
And I think that you hit on a really great point. We talked about it a couple times, but I just want to highlight it, and that is meaningful, right? When I put up everything in the room, when I have these beautiful displays, these Pinterest-worthy things going on in the room, to me, the message it sends, and I could be wrong, is that this is my space. This is as the teacher, my room, and it looks how I want it to look because that's what I like. And that doesn't make it meaningful to the children, and I think that we've really gotten away from that, especially like in the last 10 to 20 years, where the classroom has to have a boho theme or a farmhouse theme or it just, like HGTV should not be the determining factor in how we decorate our classrooms. Like,
I always say the theme of my classroom is student-centered.
Yeah.
That's this theme. Or maybe sometimes I say kid created. That's the theme.
Yeah.
And the other thing, to piggyback on what you just said, when you put things up in your classroom that you want kids to engage with, and I'm talking about the calendar is one example. I know I've said it a few times. When I made the shift to having kids be a part of creating the calendar, they started looking at the calendar. They started talking about the calendar. They started asking more questions about the calendar because it was their calendar. They made it. Another example is there's a social worker at my school, a social worker guidance counselor, who would come in once a week. A lot of schools do this and do some social emotional work with the kids. And we were using this program, Kelso's Choices. Kelso's this little frog, and it's all about teaching kids how to handle problems. If they have a problem in the classroom or on the playground with a peer, what are the different kinds of problems, and then what can they do? And it took her, 4 or 5 weeks to get through the whole thing. And then she handed me a piece of paper, it was like an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper that had all the choices on a wheel. And she said, here, you could put this up in your classroom so the kids can remember. And I smiled because it was nice that she gave that to me. But in my head, I was thinking, they're never going to look at this. First of all, it's tiny. And second of all, they had nothing to do with it. So I asked her, were there any more resources? And she pointed me to the website for this program. And there were actually coloring pages that were just black and white coloring pages for each choice. It's a big circle, and I want to say maybe there's 10 that go around the circle. And these are things like, if I'm having a problem, I can walk away, pick another game, rock, paper, scissors, like different things that kids could try before they need an adult to help. And so what I did was I had my kids work in partnerships they each got one of the choices and they colored it. And then I gave them a sentence strip because let me tell you, when you do this work, if you don't want to use cash register tape, sentence strips are your best friend.
Right.
I gave them each a sentence strip and they wrote rock, paper, scissors, walk away, whatever it was. And we took that and we turned it into a big bulletin board in the classroom. Now, what do you think kids engage with more? Something that I just put up that's like a poster or a paper that comes with a program, or something that they actually colored, wrote, and helped me decide how to put it up and display it on the bulletin board? I think that the answer is obvious, right? So if we want kids to engage with things, we should let them be a part of the process. And for people who work with little kids, like preschool or even, maybe even a little younger, they're thinking, well, how can I have kids do this? I have done this work with preschool classrooms, and it does look a little different. it could be that the teacher is doing the majority of the work, but the students are involved in the process. Mm-hmm. It could be that kids are just writing the first letter of a word. Maybe I can't think of a word that starts with a V besides Vanessa, but let's just say very is a word that I want to write. So I'm going to invite little 3-year-old Vanessa up to practice writing her V's, and she's just going to write the V, and then I'm going to write the rest of the word. So still participating, still part of the process. It doesn't mean that kids have to write everything.
Yeah, I totally agree. And this to me, the whole theme of this, what we're talking about here is working smarter, not harder when it comes to
100%.
The walls in your classroom. And I think a lot of folks also, and myself included in the past, in the summer, when we're getting ready to go back to school, there's a lot of things that are out of our control. There's very little that we can control. We don't know who our kids are yet in most cases. We don't know what the new school year is going to bring. Maybe there's new curriculums galore. There's new assessment. There's all kinds of training. So sometimes we're like, okay, I'm really stressed about all the new stuff that's coming my way, new students, new rules, everything. So I'm going to focus on what I can control, and that is the walls in my classroom. And that makes sense. But I really think if we look at it from a perspective of teaching smarter instead of harder, that our time that we spend doing that could be better spent elsewhere. When you were talking about little kids and how they can get involved in making the bulletin board borders, I remembered something buried deep in my memory. I remembered something. So it's in there. So I remember when I was at Head Start, I had about 2, maybe 3 bulletin boards in the classroom, and I wanted them to look different, like with different borders, and I wasn't really sure how to do that if I couldn't buy anything. So I remember I didn't have a whole lot in my classroom, but I did have some old alphabet stamps. And so for like our writing center area or art center, I just put out the ink and the stamps. Let me tell you, kids are like moths to a flame when it comes to ink and stamps. Oh my gosh,
I love that.
Covered the table with the butcher paper, put those receipt tapes out, and just let them go to town. And that was our paper for our bulletin board border for the art center or the writing. I had like writing and art and all that all in one. But it was just, that gave it that special spark. And then,
And I hope, and I'm guessing you're going to tell me no. I was going to say, I hope you took pictures of that, but you probably didn't.
Well, I have.
Or if you did, who knows where they are?
I have some pictures probably somewhere. I don't know if they depict that or not, but they're going to be not digital,
like an actual picture.
An actual Kodak film.
You're making me think of other things that I've done in preschool classrooms. And when I say preschool, I mean preschool, but also this is things that you can be thinking about if you're a kindergarten teacher at the beginning of kindergarten, because at the beginning of kindergarten, a lot of our kids might be a lot like a preschooler. In addition, I love that idea of using stamps and that kind of a thing. You can also, if you're actually trying to write letters or numbers, you can write it with a yellow highlighter or a yellow marker and let kids trace it. You can do hand over hand, right? If I know I keep saying little Vanessa, and now I'm picturing you like with pigtails or something, like being tiny. Let's say that I call you up and you don't know how to write a V, even though that's the first letter of your name. I can show you how to hold the pencil or the marker, and I can just hand over hand do it with you. There's so many ways to include all the kids, depending on their comfort level and their skill level. So there's a way to do it. You just have to be patient. And I love what you said about people, spending all their time before school starts. What I tell people is get a couple professional books, go to the beach, go to the park. Instead of going to your classroom, take, we could talk about professional books. Vanessa wrote a really good one. And I have it right back there. Do you want me to go get it?
So did you.
You can take a professional book and go, to me, that is the way to feel a little bit more empowered and prepared.
Yeah. And they get you excited too. That's the thing I like about reading professional development books. There's usually some gold nuggets embedded in there that get you really excited and energized. Oh, that's really, I'm going to do that this year. Like, that's cool.
You said something that I didn't know, which was that the whole idea of Head Start not allowing you to have store-bought things. That's amazing. I love that. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah. I don't know if they still do or not. This was many, many moons ago. Things could have changed. But in the program that I worked in, we did not have things that were store-bought. I remembered some other things that some of my coworkers did. See, you're just bringing up all these buried memories. Those bingo dot markers. Now, back in the day, they were from the dollar store, and they were like permanent ink. But if you cover your tables with butcher paper, one teacher had her kids doing the bingo daubers because she had like the threes, and so they're a little different. And then another one,
that's about all they can do. But
yeah, another one had them do finger paint. They pretended they were playing the piano and did a little finger paint. It's just to give it some variety. But I just remember the possibilities are endless, as we like to say.
And what you will discover, or I should say, what I've discovered, and I think teachers who do this work start to discover this, is it's like a snowball. The more you do it, the bigger it gets. And the more you start seeing opportunities all throughout your day for kids to participate and for kids to create things. And again, kind of like what Vanessa just said, it's like working smarter, not harder. So if I'm teaching a math lesson where we're making a graph of everyone's favorite color, which is a math lesson that I normally would teach, instead of me spending all my time before school or the night before at home creating this big chart and writing all the colors and that kind of a thing, I just I wait for the kids. It takes just a few minutes for them to do that work. And what starts to happen is you see opportunities, and what's even better is that the kids see opportunities. Yeah. Students will start saying, hey, we could make that. Oh, we need to, we're learning about teen numbers and we want to make cards for all the teen numbers. How could we do that? Oh, we could hold up our hands and, well, I can't do it by myself, but like someone, you could just hold up your hands and we could write the numbers and all that kind of a thing. And then what started happening after a few years of doing this is, and I don't want to blow anyone's mind, but I'm just going to tell you, it started to bleed into even like dramatic play. So, maybe instead of the cash register that I had, which I'm sure lots of people have, you can picture it. It's that plastic cash register. It's like dark red and dark blue. You know the one. Most people have it. My kids were like, could we make our own cash register? I don't know. Could you? What would we need? A cardboard box. Luckily, Mr. Halpern has an addiction to Amazon. I could bring in a cardboard box. So here's a cardboard box. What goes on a cash register? Numbers. Ooh, let's look. So we used the one that I already had as a model to study, and then kids created their own cash register. Which one do you think was more fun to play with?
Right.
The one that they made. And then, that's just one little example. A lot of people do this, and I know I did too. Dramatic play, often I had, I don't want to say themes, but it was like every month to 6 weeks, it would change. It would be a restaurant. Right. It would be a daycare. It would be a vet. And I started saying, okay, so now it's going to be a restaurant. What do we need to create a restaurant, and let the kids do it? And eventually I ended up, after a couple of years of doing that, what should this be? Like, why am I telling you it should be a restaurant? One year, my students said they wanted to make a Starbucks. Which really confused me. Like, why would kindergartners want to make a Starbucks? And I asked them, and they said that it was because it was my favorite place to go, because I always had a Starbucks every morning. And so we actually walked to the Starbucks. It was within walking distance as a little excursion. I told the Starbucks people we were coming, and we studied the Starbucks. So they all had little clipboards, and they were taking notes and drawing pictures of what they saw. And then we went back to the classroom, and I said, okay, what did you see? What do we need? We need a menu. We need a coffee machine. We need a cash register, all the things that they saw that they needed. And we spent, a good week creating all that. They had a blast. And I will say the Starbucks people were so nice. They gave us cups and they even gave us some coffee beans. So again, this is, to me, you can start with a little seed. Like maybe I'm going to let kids help make the schedule or the calendar, pick one thing, and then slowly think about how it can grow. And it will grow because your students will love doing it.
Yeah. That was so sweet. That must have been so fun and memorable for your kids, because
it really was.
Even if kids do go there, because they might go there with the drive-thru every morning with their parent, on the way to school. It has meaning for them in that way. And so I think that's great, the way that you followed their lead and then also did a field trip, quote unquote, around it. I mean, how often do they get to go inside and actually like take notes as I'm doing something here, instead of being told, don't touch anything, if you touch it, we have to buy it.
I will say, if you do that, warn the people that you're coming.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm coming with a kindergarten class, just so they know.
Right. Absolutely. So to circle back to bulletin boards in the classroom, like if I had to sum up my philosophy or the way that I do bulletin boards to get them ready for like when the kids first come in or whatever, I would say my philosophy would be black bed sheets are your friend. They never fade. They stay up all year. I never have to change the paper. And my principal loved it because he or she didn't have to get the PTA to buy more butcher paper to use as the background. It was just always black paper because that looks great in the background. I just left it up all year. I even left the same borders up all year. I just changed out their work with these little like clothespins I had up there. And it's just so freeing and so stress less, so I that's just the way I approach it. Now, some schools I understand don't even allow you to put paper on the bulletin boards. So that's can be a blessing.
I will tell you, I got to the point where my bulletin boards, now I will say the classroom that I was in was, I know not every bulletin board's like this. I thought the bulletin boards looked nice with nothing on them. They were kind of like a cork.
Sure.
So that color. So I thought it was very natural looking. So I was happy to have nothing. I mean, when I say nothing, I mean nothing. They were naked. I will tell you that there were other teachers in my wing that were mortified that I didn't have up any paper or fabric. But you know what? It wasn't their classroom. So
yeah.
Oh, well.
Absolutely.
And it worked for me.
I can think of some teachers who would be mortified if it's some teachers I've worked with who would be mortified if I had indeed left no paper on the bulletin boards at all and no coming soon construction tape or anything like that. Would have really freaked them out. I remember there was a teacher in my school district and I had visited her classroom and I came back and told all of my friends in my grade level about her classroom. She had a clawfoot bathtub in the middle filled with really fancy like pillows with fringe, and there were like boas hung over the she had all these lamps. It was like she'd gone to Hobby Lobby and just spent $1 million. And she had bar stools, like at all of her tables, like little bar stools. And it was just so amazing. It was just like something out of like Willy Wonka Chocolate Factory. Like you're just, oh, wow. And I was telling all my friends about it and they were like, I am not getting a bathtub. Like, it's always been my dream. Like, every time I see one on the side of the road, occasionally I'll see one and go, oh, I need it. No, I don't. I don't need it.
Well, and the other thing I will tell people, because when I write about this or post about it or talk about it on my podcast, most people love it, but there is always pushback, right? So another thing that I always implore people to think about and to reflect on is that not every kid is going to walk into that classroom that you just described and love it.
Right.
Some kids are going to walk in and feel overwhelmed, overstimulated, distracted. I know because I was that kid.
Right.
I totally would have been distracted and then probably gotten into a lot of trouble for not paying attention, not listening, because I wanted to go in the bathtub, or I was looking at, all the bright things that were all over the wall. So there is actually research. If you go online and you can Google it, there is research that shows that classrooms that are over decorated can actually be really overstimulating for a lot of kids, and then makes it harder for them to focus and learn. So if we look at it from that aspect as well, I think it puts a little bit more responsibility on us as the teachers in the room to be, wary of that and just be thoughtful about, why am I putting this up? What's the purpose? If you are going to put things up ahead of time, think about the font. I mean, how many times have you seen cursive handwriting in a pre-KK classroom? I mean, the kids, most of them can't read at all. And then you're going to put up like some fancy cursive curly font that looks beautiful, but what's the point, right? So just to be thoughtful of those things.
Right. Absolutely. And to honor the children that are in your room. One quick aside, and then we're going to wrap things up. But just when you were talking about writing things before the students came to the class, I think about all those beautiful anchor charts you see pinned all over Pinterest, and they're just gorgeous. And obviously the teacher is extremely talented artistically. Like, that's fabulous for her. But it doesn't need to be done beforehand. It shouldn't be done beforehand. It has to be done with the children, especially at the preschool and kindergarten level, because they are learning how to write. Like, they're learning like what writing is and what writing means. And the most meaningful and helpful thing you can do is to write with them. And nobody cares about your handwriting. Is your handwriting beautiful, Matt?
And you know what? And I'm not saying this as a joke. Part of my thinking around this has come from the fact that I've always been hard on myself about my handwriting, especially as an early ed teacher. I mean, I work with kindergarten teachers, I'm not even kidding, who have handwriting that literally looks like a font. I mean, it looks like you printed it out of a computer. It's just gorgeous, beautiful handwriting. I do not have that handwriting, but I have worked for many years to make my writing better.
Right.
And to me, that's something I can share with kids, right?
Right.
Because that's what we want them to do, to work and just try your best. And so I can, if they watch me write, I can voice all that over to them as I'm doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my writing never was beautiful until I had to take a year-long intensive phonics class. When I was kind of like done student teaching and getting ready to go out and get a job, I worked at a private school, and they had this phonics program where they promised the parents that all the children would learn how to read by the end of the year. I wasn't involved in that. I was just working there. But anyway, in order to work there, I know. In order to work there, you had to take this intensive phonics class, and part of it was handwriting. And so I remember the first day that I was taking this intensive phonics class, and actually what I did was I sat with the children and I pretended I was a child for a year, just for an hour a day, which just sounds great, but they were horrified at my handwriting when I started that class. And by the end of the year, my handwriting looked like all those other kindergarten teachers you see out there, just beautiful. And I was like, oh, wow, at least, I didn't enjoy taking the class, but at least now my handwriting is beautiful, because I had the worst girl handwriting out there until then. But anyway, that's a totally different story, a different podcast, but podcast episode. So let's close it out with final thoughts. What if there's somebody out there watching this today, Matt, who is like, okay, these ideas are interesting. They're out of the box. I think I might like to try it. How would you invite them to get started? What would be your best advice to somebody like that?
I think my best advice would be to start small, to think about your space and think about one thing, just one little thing. It might be your calendar. It might be your schedule. It might be one bulletin board. Maybe you have many and you just pick one, and just try it. Invite kids in to the process of creating whatever that thing is, and see how it goes. See how it makes you feel, see how it makes your students feel, and how it makes your classroom community feel. And I think if you do that, you will want to continue doing it. And then you might want to try something else. And again, I think I said this at the beginning, if there are things that you feel you must have up, put them up. And then maybe as you go through the school year, you can take them down and replace them with new ones that kids have made with you. And don't be hard on yourself, right? This is a process. Like I said, this isn't something that overnight I just said, oh, I'm going to have an empty room and kids are going to make everything. This took years for me to get to the place that I'm at now. So don't be hard on yourself. Take it slow, start easy, and just enjoy it. Because honestly, the reason I'm so passionate about it is it's fun too. It's really fun to create things with your kids and walk into your classroom and look around and see all the things that your whole class has made. It's very rewarding.
Yeah. And for our listeners or viewers who are thinking like, okay, school already started for me. This horse has already left the barn. It's too late. I don't think it's ever too late.
It's not.
I think that if you're listening to this and it's getting close to the end of the month or something. I mean, the end of the month for me used to be stressful because in that first year I was going to put up those new bulletin boards and all that. Maybe the next time you go to do that, say, I wonder if I could try this, let's see if I could just do this one bulletin board this way. Maybe it's one in your room that's out of the way that other people won't judge you on or whatever, that you just want to try it out and see how the kids respond. I think it's never, ever, ever too late to make changes like that in your classroom that are going to create opportunities for kids to have a meaningful connection to something, right? Where can our listeners continue the conversation with you if they want to talk more about this or any other topic?
You can find me on the internet. My website is matthalperneducation.com. If you go there, look for my blog on there where I'm talking about this and other topics that are related to this. And you can also find me on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. It's all on my website.
Yeah, and don't forget to check out his podcast too. So
also on my website.
Yeah, that's right. So thanks to all of our viewers and listeners out there. Until next time, I'm Vanessa Levin, and this is Matt Halpern. Onward and upward.